Good morning. Welcome to the meeting of the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant Board, June 11th, 2020. I'll call the meeting to order. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You're hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone other than HMLP recording this meeting today? If not, seeing none, then we'll just move on to our first agenda item, which is review of our 2023 financials with Goulet, Salvidio and Associates, our auditors. And I'd like to welcome Adam and Tracy, who are going to go over this with us. And if I could just ask you to, first time you speak, if you would state your name and address for the record, which is required by the open meeting law. I'd appreciate that. And I guess, can I turn it over to you, Tom, or to Adam, or who's going to lead
I think Tracy's going to lead us.
Oh, Tracy. Okay, great.
I'm Tracy Vaughn. I'm with Goulet, Salvidio and Associates. I've been auditing with Hingham Municipal Light Plant for several years. I've been with Goulet for 25 years. I'm working with Adam Strumster today. He's been with us for about 10 years. He will introduce himself in a minute. Adam, will you be monitoring a screen or controlling a screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen right now.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Adam Schrenzer. I am with Goulet Salvidio Associates. Tracy is stated. I've been with her on this job for close to 13 years now.
So we're going to start. This is our cover page. I hope everybody's had a chance to read their financial statements and have questions as we go along. The next page is a table of contents. Then the next 3 pages are our opinion. Most important part about an opinion is what we see in the second paragraph here, and you want to look for the words that say present fairly. And your audit does present fairly all the information. So you have a clean opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that we can provide. The rest of the audit report are standard language that we have to put in the report that differentiates between management's responsibilities and our responsibilities. I won't read this in detail. It's the same report we've had for several years. Hopefully you had a chance to go over it. The next 3 pages are what the GASB refers to in the as the MD&A, or the Management Discussion Analysis. This is developed by management, Tom specifically, and it's all information about the year, of what happened with Hingham Light Plant. We read it to make sure that it's consistent with what we're going to present in the rest of the financial statements, and the numbers all do match. I won't read this in detail. Hopefully you've had a chance to read this part as well.
Tracy, let me just interject here. Mike, it's hard for me to see you if you had a question. So I just want to invite you to jump in if you have questions as we're going along without raising your hand.
Thanks.
Okay.
Adam, could you zoom in a little bit more on the text? Make the white space or the gray space a little less and the white space a little more, so everybody can see it a little better. Whether that's possible.
1 second.
That's better.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
So we'll start here on page 7, which is the statement of net position. This is the asset side of what would be considered a balance sheet in your for-profit entity. One of the things I do want to make a comment first off is Hingham had a very strong year this year. And one of the things you want to look at closely when you're looking at a financial statement is the current ratio, which is their current assets over the liabilities. And that'll be on the second page. But this one number here is 14 million. And you can see in all of these categories individually, they're all a very strong number. And your current liabilities are only $2 million. So that just shows that you have a strong ability to pay and meet your financial needs in any month as it goes along. But what I want to draw your attention to too is you've put a lot of money into your depreciation fund, and your rate stabilization fund is still very strong. And when I was looking at the financial statements and comparing it to other light departments that we do, because we do about 18 light departments in the state of Massachusetts, Hingham resides in the top tier of our light departments. If we break them down into 3 tiers and we do it based on their revenue. So there's a couple of real small departments, about 5 or 6 of them. Then there's a middle tier, but Hingham's up in the top tier based on the kilowatt hours sold. You're the lowest level of our top tier, but in all aspects, your reserves, your cash, your working capital, depreciation, and rate stabilization are all very strong, in a very strong ratio to our other departments in the same category. So that's something you should be aware of, that you're in very good financial position. And I know you're working towards some very large projects. So there's a reason why you're really working towards keeping your reserves high. But that is coming through in your financial statements when I'm looking at your statements compared to others of the same industry. And you'll see in your utility plant, the 25 million versus 23, you would have expected to see a larger increase, but don't forget you have to take depreciation expense. So as it goes up, it also comes down in the same year to keep it not as high as you would expect, but it is growing every year because of all those extra projects that you're working on. And the bottom section here are the deferred outflows from the pension and the OPEB. And again, I think I've spoken about this in the past years. This is a place where the actuaries will bank either in inflows or outflows, things that they want to streamline and don't want to take into your profit and loss in any one year. So these items will be amortized into your profit and loss statement over 5 years. So you can see overall your total of your assets went from 74 million up to 81 million. Okay, if you go to the next page. This top section is the section I was referring to, where you only have $2 million of current liabilities, which is very low, which is an amazing to be able to keep up on your bills and all your current liabilities. The middle section is where we have your pension liability. And I'll just point out that your pension liability went up and almost double over last year. But that's part of the reason. The reason for that is you got to remember that the pension is based on investments as of the date of December 2022. And investments that year weren't doing as well as they're doing at the end of 23. So I would anticipate that this number will come down similar to what we had in 22. But this is a floating number based on whatever investments the actuaries are using at the time. And the pension will always be a year behind the date of the issuance of the financial statements.
Could I ask a question, Tracy? I guess I don't understand why
Oh,
the
so when you're
liability this is the net pension liability. Why does the
right, so
liability go up?
when they calculate the liability, they estimate what the investments are going to be able to do for you. And when the investment's value is low, therefore they don't have enough assets to meet the potential liability. So the liability goes up. And then in the year when the assets go up, they have enough assets to mark the liability. So then the liability would go down. So it's
Okay,
like an
net
inverse
pension
relationship to the
liability.
economy.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Sure. Down under the other deferred inflows and outflows, you'll see the changes in the investment pensions and OPEB. And again, that pension one has an inverse relationship to what's happening with the liability. And then you have your invested in net capital assets.
Okay,
your
I
depreciation.
have a question about the other post-employment benefits that I'm not sure who would answer. Tom, maybe you answer. How often do we review our OPEB liability? How, you need to study it every once in a while to know what, how it has changed over
Well,
the
the
last few
actuary
years.
does an evaluation on an annual basis, and they also
Every
look at
year.
the assets. Yeah, every year there's a
Okay.
study that comes out for the OPEB.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So then again, under net position, obviously the reserves are for your capital assets, your depreciation, because those items are restricted. But then your unrestricted net assets is $5 million, which again is very strong for a department. You'll notice with all these pension OPEBs and pension liability and OPEB liabilities, some of the departments are still at a break even or slightly even under in some cases. But you have a very strong unrestricted net position. So again, your assets, your liabilities went up from 74 million to 81 million. Over to page 9, again, your sales are just about break even. And I want to drop your attention down to the operation and maintenance. The cost of providing those services went from 26,000,008 to 26 million. And that's very consistent with all of our departments. The cost of transmission this year was just slightly under what it was last year. So everybody realized a little bit of a savings with the transmission costs this year. Overall, though, if you look down to the closer to the bottom, 4 items from the bottom, your income before contributions and transfers is 5.5 million, where last year was 3.9 million. So a very healthy increase overall for the department. I believe the very last statement of this financial statement will give you the details of the account that's called operations and maintenance. So you'll see a little bit more in detail the numbers that went up and down. Then we'll go over to the cash flow. Really, the most important part about a cash flow is this first bucket, the ability to meet your needs on a short-term basis. So it's always of a concern when it's a negative, but you can see Braintree's went from 5.7 million to 7.6 million. So it just increased, which is a really great way to look at a financial statement for cash flows. You'll see that the use of this cash flows is what you're investing in that second category here. It's either your transfers to your depreciation fund of 3 million or what you invested in your plant, which is $5 million. So the money came in and you invested it in yourself, which is a good. Overall, cash went down 700,000, but that's okay because you're investing it in yourself. So cash went from 9.7 million to 9 million. The second page of the cash flow is just more detail. This is the first when you learn accounting in school, they always want you to do the indirect method, but GASB requires us to do the other method and then show you the reconciliation how on the first method. So this is just the differences in your balance sheet. But down below here, it shows you which accounts we're considering cash when we're considering the cash flow statement. Over onto page 12, this is the financial statement for the OPEB trust. So you can see where your assets went from 2.1 million to 2.3 million. And that's because the assets actually earned money this year, 183,000. And then if you start on page 13, these are the footnotes that are required for the financial statements. I'm not going to go over each footnote in detail, read them to you, but I'm going to go over the highlights of what the footnotes represent. And please ask questions if you have them as you go along. Footnote number 1 is a summary of significant policies. These don't really change, but the one I want to draw your attention to is the one in the middle. It's called utility plant. I want to draw your attention to the 5% depreciation. You're allowed to do 3% and petition up to 5%, and you always petition up to 5% when you have a big project going on. So Hingham's been petitioning the last couple of years, and so I want you to be aware that you're taking depreciation at 5%. I think that's the only footnote I really want to talk about on that page. The second page is just more of the significant accounting policies about your contribution aid, how it's used, inventory, compensated absences. Last year, we did have a tweak to the wording for the compensated absences, so we did elaborate on that and make sure that it was correct for this year. The next page is the last part of the same significant accounting policies, talks about the description of the pension, the OPEB, the different inflows and outflows. The bottom of the page is where we start note number 2, concentrations of credit risk. There's always a risk that some banks, some companies or departments are beyond the FDIC, but it's really hard to decide when you commingle money as you're required with the town to figure out what portion could be a credit risk. So this footnotes are all standard wording on what we know about the credit risk as of Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant's standings. Note number 3 at the bottom just gives you a little information about the insurance reserve that you hold. Note number 4 gives you information about the rate stabilization fund and the balances.
Could we just go back to the previous note for just a second about the insurance reserve fund? I'm not sure I focused on this before. When do we use that insurance fund, Tom? I don't know how old it is, and or maybe Joan. I'm not sure what occasions the use of this insurance reserve fund to pay insurance costs?
It's if someone's going to sue us, we don't use it for our annual premiums. I mean, this is something that has predated me. But it's just, reserves that we have is set aside in case we ever get sued and something, insurance doesn't cover something.
Oh, so it's to cover liabilities that insurance doesn't cover.
Correct.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Note number 5 is a description of your depreciation fund. Because your depreciation is invested, it's actually more like looking like an investment footnote. So if you go over to the next page, it shows you how the money is invested. So you have $27 million, as you saw on the statement of financial position, and this is how it's invested in government securities, savings accounts, and with MMDT and money market funds. Note number 6 is a description of what's in the other accounts receivable for $987,000. It's jobbing in your solar credits. Note number 7 is the description of your purchase power working capital. There's always a need to have reserves on deposit with the people who help you buy your power. So this is a description of how much you have set aside with those people. Note number 8 is information about the investments. Hingham is part of Hydro-Quebec and is also part of E&E. So we describe both of those investments in that footnote. Note number 9 is the transactions with the related party or the town. So money that they purchase from you, or services that you provide to them, or service that you pay to them, and the pilot. Note number 10 is the diagram of what's invested in your plant, starting with land and construction in progress, where you can see construction in progress went from 1.2 million to 3.1 million over the year. And then you can see in the next category, the capital assets that are being depreciated. You have 3 buckets. You have transmission, distribution, and general plant. And on the left starts with January 1st, and on the right would end with December 31st. So you can see in the middle under the increases, you've increased your plant $3 million in addition to the 1.9 million in work in process. So you've spent that $5 million on your infrastructure. And the bottom section down there is the description of the depreciation. So you can see you depreciated the beginning of your assets at 3.4 million. Over on the next page, note number 11. This is a reconciliation and how we show you how we came up with the amount that's on the bottom of page 1 of the net position under the page 2 under the restrictions, under the equity section. So we were showing you that it's the capital assets at cost less the accumulated depreciation. If you had debt on any of these items, it would also be just part of this calculation as a reduction of the invested in capital assets, but you have no debt. Yeah. Note number 12 is the pension footnote. This is a very significantly long footnote, goes on for pages. I think the part that I want to show you is on page 23, which is the picture of the deferred inflows and outflows. This is again where the actuary makes their assumptions. One of the items I want to draw your line to is the 4th line here, the $459,000. This is the payment that you pay after the actuary has determined their work in December. So it's paid in advance for the next year's contributions. So that's also part of the deferred outflows of resources. That little table in the center there is the anticipated amortization of the net inflows and outflows as of net. That will affect your bottom line. But keep in mind these inflows and outflows get recalculated every year. So although it looks like you know what the number is going to be for the next 5 years, the next layer or the next year will affect all of those numbers yet again. So it's really hard to know how your pension or OPEB are going to affect your P&L in any given year. the bottom of this page and on to the next page is all the assumptions that the actuary used to calculate the pension. Keep going. In the middle of this page here, these are the assets that are held with the pension fund, so you can see what assets they have invested for your plan. The bottom section here of this page, this is a description of what would happen if the actuary was to change her assumption from the 7.25% discount method by 1%. You can see if she raised it and she thought you're going to get more investments, your liability would go down. But the same is true if you go in the other direction. If you dropped it to 6.25, your liability would go up. So this is what this is supposed to show you in a picture, what a 1% change, how a dramatic increase or decrease it would make on your liability. And then that's actually the end of the pension footnote. The next page, page 13, starts the OPEB trust, which is the investment part of OPEB. So this is like the investment section of the OPEB trust. So if you go over to page 27, you can see in a table form what your OPEB is actually invested in. If you recall back on the financial statement of the OPEB trust, it was that 2.3 million. So this gives you the detail of what makes up that 2.3 million. You have corporate bonds, equities, mutual funds, and government securities, and a small money market portion. The next page goes over and it gives you some description of how the OPEB trust is determined, the benefits that are provided, how you contribute, your investment policy. And down below the bottom of this page is where they calculate what the liability is. Right now it's at 4.4 million, sorry, 4 million. And at the time when they do this study, they used the assets as of June 30th. So you only had 2.2 million as of June 30th. They didn't have the 2.3 because that was a December number. And then so your liability is actually 1.7. The next page is the actuarial assumptions that are used to calculate the OPEB. And then the investment policy. Over on the next page, this is a picture of the type of investments that you have granularly into the investments. And then down below is that same type of a 1% change. This actually happened to calculate your OPEB liability on a 6.6 rate of return. And this is a description of what happens with a 1% increase or decrease. Over on the next page, because OPEB is related to health insurance, they also want to benchmark your OPEB against a health insurance rate increase. So they show you what it will look like if a health insurance rates increase and or decrease. And then the next footnote, page 14, is about more about the liability for your OPEB. Some of the information on this page is kind of redundant because it's in part of the first footnote too. Page 32 shows you the picture of the deferred outflows and inflows, similar to the same presentation of pension, although with OPEB, you don't have that piece where you pay something in advance. You only have to pay something if you choose to. You don't even have to fund the trust if you elect not to. But insurance gets paid regardless of whether you put into money to your OPEB trust or not. And then that bottom page there is the amortization of the deferred inflows and outflows into your P&L over the course of time. Page 15 is your insurance trust. You're part of the self-insurance trust, which is a group of 17 municipals that self-insure. So the trust covers a portion, and then anything over that portion would be self-insured by the department. And then note 16 starts your power commitment descriptions and all the contracts that you have. That goes on for several pages. And then the last couple of pages of the EMA portion of your power. And then that turns us over to the RSI for pension and OPEB. Pension is the first page. This statement is required to be 10 years, which I believe we have one more year after this, so we'll squeeze one more year on next year, and then they will start dropping off. It's all the same information that was in the financial statements and or the footnotes. However, they'd like to see it, in case you wanted to see it all on one page, and how the pension has gone up or down over time. So they required us to put this all on one page.
Tracy, could you explain that? Who is they? Is it Gatsby?
Oh, yeah,
And-
the GASB, yeah. When the GASB puts in a standard, they tell you how they want things presented and what the requirements are to meet the presentation. So yes, I'm sorry, the GASB, they.
Okay, and so ultimately there will be 10 years on this and rolling.
Ultimately, there'll
as
be 10
go
years on
by.
this
I
page,
see.
yes, so I
Okay,
believe we
thank
have
you.
one more.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 9 right now, so you'll have one more.
Okay.
And then same thing for the next 2 pages, it's OPEB. And again, the GASB has determined that they'd like 10 years presented. The OPEB, instead of squishing it onto one page, we had to put it into 2 pages because there's a little bit more information that they wanted us to present in these RSIs. But again, I think the disclosure was that they wanted you to be able to see the trend all in one place for 10 years. So you can kind of get an idea that sometimes it's just all over the board. But it's a good picture of both OPEB and pension. And then the last page of the financial statements here, last footnote is on page 40, and it's about any changes in assumptions that are made throughout the year. So you can see this one is about the OPEB where they changed an inflation rate, not even like a discount rate, but the inflation rate changed. Page 41 is the description of your sales categories, so residential, commercial, municipal, and street lighting as compared to 2022. And the very last page here, page 42, is more information on that 26 million that went down from 26.8 million. So at the top, it's the power, then you have distribution, maintenance, customer deposits, and general. And the item I'm going to point out in the general is you can see the employee pension and benefits, see how it went from 950,000 to 1.6 million. This is where those amortizations of the different inflows and outflows or the changes in the pension, the OPEB, this all falls into this bucket. So at any given year, the number could change dramatically. So that 1.6 million is a big increase for you. It's $500,000. So that's all with the financial statements. Are there any questions?
Mike, do you have any further comments or questions about this?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, any staff comments or questions? The staff is probably pretty aware of what's in here already. Okay, are there?
And Tyler is on, Laura. So
Oh, great. Welcome, Tyler. So Tyler, I don't know where you popped into the discussion. Do you have any questions or comments on the financials that we just went over?
No, not right now. Thank you.
Okay. Are there questions and comments from the public about the financials? Susan?
Susan Wetzel, 239 High Street. Just a couple quick questions. First of all, can I get a copy of this?
Certainly.
this will
Okay.
be posted on on our website once we have the final copy of it, final draft.
Okay. Did you all receive a copy of this before the meeting?
We have a virtual copy, an email copy.
Okay. Just a couple of quick questions. The trust and the OPED trust and the self-insured trust, who is responsible for the overseeing of that? Do you have like a board of trustees, or does that fall under you, Tom, or Laura, the board?
What was it again? The
OPED trust.
OPEB, that is the town.
So that's the general town that oversees that. Okay.
I think it goes into the OPEB funds for the town is invested all together with the town's funds.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they have a consultant who oversees the investing.
Okay, so it's a consultant that's overseeing that. To
It's
your
a,
knowledge.
it's a large, it's a large investment firm that's all public entities, and the town can sometimes negotiates with that entity. They say, well, we want our stuff invested this way, or we want our stuff invested that way. So the town does have input into that. It isn't just decided by the outside group.
Okay, so you as a board don't have any, or Tom don't have any say about this. It's all the town.
I would say that's right. Yeah.
Okay, is that the same? Then that must be different for the self-insurance trust, because if I understand her correctly, she said that that was combined with other municipalities. Did I understand that? I'm not sure how to clarify
That's
that.
correct. Yeah, that's a separate board, and I sit on that board.
So does every entity have a member on that board, or are they
Yes.
elected?
Yeah,
So-
every entity has a member on that board.
Okay, and then you all meet regularly for that?
Yeah.
Or intermittently? Okay. And then the other question was, is this a defined benefit pension plan or just self-contributory? What kind of benefit plan do you have?
Yes, defined benefit plan.
It is a defined benefit plan. Okay.
Yes.
And then I guess the only other question I have, which is last but probably not least, is the question is, I'm sorry, I didn't take my picture off. The question was with regards to the assumption that the inflation rate is 2.5%. Where did that assumption come from at that time? That would have been for 2023, 2022 to 2023.
That for OPEB, it would have been for 2023, and it's something the actuary determines and gives us. So we have no involvement with the actuarial assumptions. We just have to tell you what the actuary has decided when she does her calculations.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's it. No more questions.
Okay. Maybe if you could unshare your screen so it'd be easier to see if there's anybody else who has questions while we're doing this. Are there any other comments or questions from anyone about the draft financials? Okay, I don't see any. Are you going to discuss your opinion letter that you gave us?
Yes, we also have an internal control letter as part of our audit. There's always things that we look at, and we make recommendations on things that are could be tightened up with the department itself during the year, but then things that are significant, we're required to put by GASB to put into this report. So the item that's on this financial statement, on this report, sorry, not financial statement, is the drafting of the financial statements. The AICPA, which is the Accounting Standards Board that we have to adhere to, requires that if the client doesn't draft the financial statements from beginning to end, balance sheet, profit and loss, cash flow, footnotes, pension, OPEB, all the required disclosures, leases happened this year, then there could be a potential that us drafting the financial statements for the entity, that there could be a mistake or a material misstatement that we didn't observe because we're not in there with you on a day-to-day basis. But this is not uncommon for a department of your size. Every financial statement that we issue, we draft the statements, then we go over with your management. They review them, and if there's things that we weren't aware of, we would, collaboratively work to make sure that everything is presented to the best of both of our abilities. So although it's considered a significant deficiency, it's something that's common on every department of your size. I think the only financial statement that I've ever been involved with in my 30 years of experience was a United Way, and they had a CPA on board who was drafting financial statements all the time. So they were very comfortable with drafting the statements and all the required disclosures and all their weird calculations that United Way has because of all their other items of their funding with their fundraising entities required. So on that particular entity, we just had to review their statements as it was and add our opinion letter. It was very odd, but that's the only one I've ever been involved with that drafted their own financial statement. So that's the extent of this footnote. Hingham is working very well. There's some departments that have, issues with inventory from time to time or customer deposits, and I can't say that Hingham has any of those situations. We haven't come across anything.
Thanks. I know we see this note every year, and I guess this year it crossed my mind to wonder what would it look like if we did do this. But it sounds like you would have to have a CPA on staff it's kind of
Stays up to
it's kind
date
of
with
a
all the
control
GASB changes.
it's a
GASB
control
changes,
that's
there's
out
stuff-
of kind of out of reach for an
Yes.
entity of our size. Is that how you would describe it?
Yes, I would, because the GASB changes stuff on a yearly basis. There's 5 or 6 new GASBs that you have to interpret and then learn. And then we do, like I said, we do 18 of them. So when we finally decide what the footnote looks like, it's easy for us to try to say, okay, this is how this affects everybody. And we kind of brainstorm and we kind of cover the whole industry that we can at once. To do a one-off financial statement, to gather all that information, it's really going to be complicated.
Mhm. Okay.
Not that Joan's not capable. She is fully capable of doing it.
Yeah.
I just don't know that she keeps up with all the current GASBs as they come along.
Yeah. So, okay, if you could unshare so I can see if there's anybody else who has comments. Anybody on the board, comments or questions on the opinion letter? Or the staff? Or the public? Okay, great. Super. And then there's the DPU report. You create that report
We
for
do
us,
create
correct?
the DPU report, yep, from the information provided from the department on information that we wouldn't have handy. We put all the information that's related to a financial statement, the balance sheet, the P&L, but we wouldn't have footage of poles or wire or number of meters and all that stuff. So then that information is provided and we draft. I don't typically go over it with the board, but we did give the draft back so we could be signed by you guys.
Mhm. Tom, do we post the DPU report as well on the website?
We do, yep.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
There is one
Okay.
other report that I believe you got from us this year too. In situation, so our office, our firm is required to go through peer review every 3 years. It's a requirement of the AICPA to be a CPA firm. Every 3 years, an independent CPA firm will review our work and make recommendations. So one of the recommendations that we got this year is for this letter is called Communication with Governance. And it's just to make sure that we're discussing everything that, that a board may be interested in. It's something we've always done. We put it in our file, but they said for those boards that we do see, we should also do it for them as well. So we've always done this for people we don't go to board meetings, but now he's asking us or recommending that we do it for people that we go to the meetings. So this letter really, I won't go over it in detail, but it does cover the significant estimates that are part of your financial statement, but we talk about that as you go along. We talk about the depreciation or the estimates with the deferred inflows and outflows. They also wants to draw your attention to some journal entries that we made or some items that we passed on. So that's what this letter is really about. That's why it's the first year you've seen this letter. We've always commented these things in our file, but never actually issued an official letter to you. So this is the letter form of things that we talk about during our meeting. So you can read it, and then if you have any questions, just let us know. I don't find it to be significant, but it's required now.
Okay, I'm not sure that the board received that before the meeting, so maybe you could send that out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Tom,
If I haven't sent it, I will send it. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. So I want to thank the firm and everybody who worked on this, and especially thank Joan and the staff for doing such a great job, having everything ready to go and making it sounds like it was not too hard this year to put it all together.
She went really smoothly. I know Joan stresses out about our time frame. We always don't start till the end of April, but we can turn it on. Typically, in most years, we can turn it around in about a month or so. So it did go very smoothly this year.
Great. Thanks to the staff for making that all work well, and thanks to the firm. So I would entertain a motion for the board to accept the draft financial statements as presented today.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Tyler?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, guys.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Tracy.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the second item on the agenda. This was a discussion that I just wanted to sort of begin with the board, something I was talking about Tom with last week. I was considering the goal that the town is committed to have a net zero carbon emissions community by 2040, which is very aggressive, and asking myself what this requires of the light plant. And of course, it requires 100% carbon-free power portfolio, which is not where we are now, but we have been moving steadily in that direction for some years. And I asked myself looking at that project as a whole, what's involved in getting there, all the pieces. And I certainly don't know the answer, and I don't have the knowledge, experience, or expertise to come up with a plan like that. So I asked Tom what he thought about the idea of doing a study to create such a plan with the town's goal 2040 as the endpoint. And I would view as the goal of the plan to see how we would achieve that 100% carbon-free power portfolio. And a second goal would be, and this would be a tool for the first goal, smoothing the demand curve to cut the costs for everyone, both the ratepayers and the light plant would benefit from that. And I envision, although this may not be exhaustive or even on the mark, but I envision that this would involve some combination of the kinds of power contracts we have, some amount of batteries on our system to allow for peak shaving so that we can cut the amount of system power that we bring in, supplemented by some amount of local generation, probably as solar, some balance of all three of those things. And I feel like having a plan like that would help us make decisions about how many megawatts of battery storage are we shooting for? Right now, we're just looking to get experience with having batteries on our system, but it would help me at least looking forward to have a vision of how many batteries we might need, what they would look like, and how much local generation could contribute to this goal. Those are all, and that with the contracts are all independent variables that vary in different ways and are hard to predict. One of the sub goals that you could imagine in such a plan might be, and I keep bringing this up, but I'm not sure it's in order, being able to provide emergency backup for emergency shelters or for the DPW, for example, or the water department in case of outage. But that may or may not emerge from such a plan, but that would be an interesting thing to look at. And one of my concerns about hiring a consultant to create such a plan is that things are changing so fast in terms of the technology and the way the market works. Is it possible that we would create a plan that would have no relevance in 10 years because everything has changed in ways that we can't predict today? I could imagine that it'd be possible to create such a plan to say, today, if we could, wave a magic wand and change our power supply and our grid, et cetera, here's what it would look like today to do that. But creating a plan to get there from here is completely different and dependent a lot on how things will change over the future. So that's something that gives me pause about creating such a plan. Could it possibly simply be not helpful? So Tom suggested that we had just talk about whether or not conducting such a study is a good idea and whether it would be helpful, feasible, useful, doable. Just wanted to chat with you, Mike and Tyler, about that. You're not muted, Tyler, I don't think.
Yeah, I think in my mind, the biggest question mark is what's our demand going to look like? You know, I've recently looked at a lot of different demand studies from some of the independent system operators, and there are some pretty aggressive predictions on how things like, you know, not something relevant to us, but like data centers, how those are going to impact the grid and how there's going to be this explosion of data center demand. You know, for the town, we're not hosting a bunch of data centers here, but it's a relevant question to us to think about how our demand is going to grow over time and how that affects what supply plan that we're going to try and tailor for that. One of the biggest mistake that we could make is to really try that I can think of right now is to have a long-term projection for demand that ends up being extremely wrong, and we end up over procuring a lot of power. In the past, I've seen municipal utilities do exactly that and bankrupt themselves. So that's the biggest red flag of just not really red flag, but just thing to be concerned with in my mind.
So that could be right up front as a question to study.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same things about the amount of power that's going to be needed and when that power is going to be needed and how we're going to supply that power. I think that for me, the unknown right now is how we're going to integrate the car batteries that are going to be available, what software is going to be available to help us potentially help ourselves within the town by using our electric vehicles as battery sources compared to having a large municipal facility. And if we do, then where would those be sited? Where would we get the best benefit and resiliency from it? So I think our scenario is unique because of the town of Hingham, because of our various dynamics and what we're trying to do. There's still a number of variables that are out there, but there's no question our demand overall is going to increase. But how much is it going to increase during those peaks, and how do we best manage those peaks?
Yeah, I was actually been looking at some of the other towns' sustainability plans over the last month or so, and because something came to mind, which is a big worry of mine, and I found it in the Ipswich plan, which shows their supply portfolio as it's changing in the future, and really the way that they're achieving their goals, or the way they're proposed to last, was to wind down the purchases of fossil fuel power off their portfolio, increase the percentage of renewable sources, but then basically supply the rest of the power directly from the grid in spot market purchases, which they'll then self-supply RECs for. And I looked at
self-supply RECs. You mean buy RECs to cover?
Buy RECs.
Yeah. Okay.
Buy RECs. And to me, I think that's a very dangerous plan, because that exposes the utility to the volatile prices from the spot market for, at least in the town's plan I was reviewing, up to 80% of their entire portfolio. Whereas
Wait, they were going to buy 80% of their portfolio on the spot market? Is that what you just?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That's what their projection shows. Maybe their intentions are to increase the amount of supply of contracted supply over time, but the way that they have it now is that in 2030 they'll have 80% coming directly from the spot market.
80%.
80, yeah.
Okay, let's not do that.
Wow.
Right.
I'm sensing a consensus here on the board, and possibly with the general manager, that not the direction we want to go.
And so I was trying to come up with maybe a motion for us to set some policy in place whereby we have some sort of a minimum threshold for contracted supply, whether it's 60, 70, 80. I think something that what we have right now is really good, but we're only going for 25 to 30% of our supply to the spot market. But I think something like that could be a good piece of policy for us to consider at some point.
Sure. I think that the general manager has a policy that is in place with Energy New England about, and don't we do we sort of tell them, okay, how does it work now, Tom? Do we tell
Yeah.
them we don't want to purchase more than 80% of our power supply? Because I know that other MLPs have different policies about that.
Yeah, basically, and it's, I don't think it's a policy, but it's been the practice is that we try to stay somewhere around 80% hedged. So, we have contracts for about 80% of our power and the other 20%. And again, it depends on the day, the time, the month. But typically we're somewhere around 80% hedged.
So it's not an absolute number. So if you constructed such a policy, it would need to have flexibility in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We do the best we can with E&E to maintain 80%, but there are some times when we're particularly seasonally where we might be either more or less.
I'm just curious, Tyler, what you read in Ipswich's plan. Their plan is to let go of their fossil fuel generation over time. And do you think were they making an assumption that there would be no increase in renewable energy available, that they for contracting, that they could replace that fossil fuel generation with, and that's why they're going to buy everything on the spot market? Was that the idea?
I think that you kind of have to read between the lines to get that. And, in some ways, I don't think that they, I don't know what their intentions were, but I would hope that their intentions were to secure more supply over time. And in some ways, I think that it's good not to necessarily contract for 30-year power right now, just because of the question that I raised earlier, which was us, them and us. We just don't know what our demand is going to be 15, 20 years from now. And so if we try and procure for the projected level of demand, that's where we could get ourselves into a lot of trouble as well.
How do you feel about this general practice that we have now of trying to be at about 80%? Does that feel safe to you?
I think it does.
But that does raise for me the question of, some of our contracts are very long term. Right, Tom? Some of them go out decades even.
Yeah, like the nuclear contract goes out to, I believe it's to 2050 right now. Some of the renewable contracts go out for 20 years life of project, typically for a wind turbine, a solar farm, that type of thing.
So when the new offshore wind farm power, when that becomes available, is it starting to hit the market now? What's the length of those contracts? And I realize there's intermittency involved there that will likely be made up from peaker gas plants.
Yeah, those haven't hit the market yet, to my knowledge.
Okay. But do we know if they're likely to be short-term, long-term life of the capital equipment?
Again, I think a lot of it depends on, what the IOUs take out of that and what's left for the municipalities.
Okay.
I know E&E is working on, working with some of the solar developers to try to get in early to get a piece of the power, but typically it's life of the unit.
Right.
So let me just ask if the board feels like it makes sense to try to conduct a study, or the study may tell us there are too many variables in play to plan more than, I don't know, 5 years out in advance. I don't know.
Right.
My thought about funding it, if we did do it, was that we could talk to the Energy Action Committee and see if we could get the cost of the study put on the green communities, our green communities plan for projects that we can apply for funds to the state to do. Maybe we could get it funded that way. It's not super urgent, obviously, because it's about the far future. So we could perhaps wait a round or two of grants to get that. But I don't even actually know, Mike, maybe you know, but I don't even actually know if that falls within the green
Cover.
communities, available projects.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is all shaking out, how the different states are going to implement the federal money that's available. I think most interesting to me would be a study and a better understanding of how our peak period is really projected to go, both on a high scale and also a low scale, depending on how our demand management practices that we can put into place can move forward. And if our peak, if we're able to flatten it and control it, then I think that will allow us to save a lot of money in having to go to the spot market, where really and truly a few bad days at the office, so to speak, can really hurt you. And the way that we control those, I certainly noticed that the water company puts out a lot of information bulletins now when the water may not be as clear as it might be, and it gets to people. So if we are able to invoke conservation at times when we see prices spiking, that's in everybody's best interest. And I think today we saw a very good comprehensive set of audits from the financials, which everybody should be proud of. As a town, we all need to take that responsibility. Us as a board need to make sure that we move in the right direction. But the peak's my main concern. And that's also from a carbon production and offset perspective as well, because that's when we're going to see more and more gas-fired plants being relied on for up until 2050 and beyond. There's no question in my mind we need those units to balance the intermittency of the renewables, the wind and solar.
So you make a really good point that I did not include in my list of variables that we would want to look at would be a projection of demand management policies that we would be able to put in place, and that's important. And Tyler points out that the whole thing has to be done within the context of projected demand. That's kind of where such a study has to start.
We do have the study that the analysis group did. It's probably 3 to 4 years old now, but I could send that out to the board so they could take a look at that.
That would be great. My recollection was that the question asked at that time was, what would our demand look like if 50% of the town's energy use was electric?
Correct. Yep.
Right. So that could give us a good feel, but it probably is time to revisit that in some way. So how do people feel about pursuing such a study? Mike and Tyler. And
I think it would be good to have a high level study that sort of puts the items that we might want to research in greater detail and depth at a later date, just so that we don't miss anything, and that we have basically started a plan that we can review on an annual basis and revise. So I think getting started is good, but putting a whole lot of money into a consultant-generated report may not be the wisest way we spend our dollars.
do you feel that we could create such a plan ourselves?
I think that would be a good place to start, yes.
Okay, I know I can't. Let me ask Tom how he feels about that idea.
Yeah, I don't know that we have the that ability. I mean, I could talk with E&E to see if they could help us with something like that, but
Yeah.
that may be outside of their realm also.
Have the investor-owned utilities put anything out? Are there any documents that we can sort of use as a template, so to speak?
That I don't know. We could take a look.
I mean, I'd be very curious to see where our demand increases are coming from. Are they coming from induction stoves when everybody decides that they want to cook their rice and their pasta or whatever at a certain time? Or is it just the inadvertent usage of electric chargers during that peak? Is it the electric ovens that are causing the issue because they tend to use a lot of power? Those are the things that we can control to a certain extent, but only to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, we can always look to ISO New England for those types of
Yeah, I mean,
forecasts.
we're a subset of the greater population, but we're not that unique that our behavior is that different.
Yeah.
Brianna.
An alternative as well is the Serum tool. So we have a beta version of that from early on when they were developing it. And I think, Laura, you've seen a copy of that. Something they have created a dashboard at this point that I think MLPs are being offered. And I've seen the tools. So I think that's something if we wanted to go more of the internal route and try to do something ourselves, we'd want to invest in a tool like Serum. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, could you describe what the tool does for everybody?
Yes, it has a series of inputs. So you have your local data, and I'm curious to see how they're populating it in the dashboard, but you would manipulate adoption rates of heat pumps, solar, different things, and it would change your demand curve. You would see how those different costs get reflected. And then you could either look at how much investment it takes to reach certain adoption points, or vice versa. What is the cost when you have this much DER on the system? So it's measuring the distributed energy assets and how that all plays into a big picture of what your portfolio looks like and things like that.
Yeah, another point I'm just thinking about is Sense, and we've talked about that a little bit as that program gets built into smart meters. But Sense, as a company, Sense Laboratories has a huge repository of data that they could potentially query and get a much better idea of how solar tails off in the afternoon and the demand goes up. I mean, maybe they're a resource, or people that have access to their data set are a resource for modeling and predicting what future demand curves we're likely to see.
So if at this moment, if we were to go forward with looking for some kind of a study to try to project our demand growth and seeing how we could meet that, our entire portfolio requirements with contracts for renewable energy, batteries for peak shaving, local distributed energy generation, and demand management practices. If we decided to do such a thing, the main use of our resources would be probably to write that up, and to write up the questions, the RFP, if you will, for well, here are the questions we want to answer. That's the main thing that would require of the staff right now. So just want to ask Tom how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think that it would be the starting point is, develop, a list of questions that we want answered, and then prioritize those, and, we could go to again, an analysis group type, consultant. I know the analysis group is, a little pricey, but, they do a good job, and they're on they have the pulse of the whole energy system and generation to, distribution.
Okay, board members, should we ask the staff to develop this list of questions that we might get a study to answer? Tyler's nodding.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
Mike is nodding.
Yeah,
Okay,
as long as the study, like Mike said, is not too, we're not trying to do a 50-year study, which costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
More short to medium term in nature.
well, it's basically 15 years to 2040. Is
Yeah.
that we're talking medium term here. We're not looking at a long term. It's no longer a long term goal, unfortunately.
I think for me, the biggest issue right now is the unknown of, what is the wind going to be? Obviously the wind is going to be a big part of this, right? And is it going to happen really because of the economics of it?
There's that, and then there's how is the intermittency issues of the availability of that resource going to impact it as well, even if we do get into relying on that or have the opportunity to buy into it, which right now we don't really have much of.
Yeah. The financial liability of when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. How do we meet that load? How do we hedge against it? How do we insure against an extremely large hit during the hottest and coldest periods of the year?
I think that if we do a study on our future supply, we should include in that study the consultant should do a sort of a menu of options depending upon, like, let's say, for example, what would our supply costs look like under different scenarios of here's where your supply is coming from, whether it's, X megawatts of solar, X megawatts of wind, and X megawatts of batteries. I've seen several studies trying to get to 100% renewable supply scenarios for different ISOs. One of which was done by McKinsey, showing, the New York's goal and how the different percentages of renewable supply versus dispatchable thermal supply, how they affected the cost of supply. And the cost basically went up exponentially once you get to 100% renewable, because you basically had to, or at least McKinsey was saying that you had to basically invest in roughly 300% of the capacity needed in terms of wind, solar, and batteries to be able to rely upon that resource to supply the demand at any time. If you don't have, let's say, if you had under the scenario of having 0 natural gas power plants, for example. So at some point when we're looking at that plan, we'll need to decide where on that cost curve we want to come out, and what's practical for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in a minute, I'm going to entertain a motion to ask the staff to develop a description of a study to ask how we can meet the town's goal of 100% carbon-free power portfolio. But first I want to ask if there's anybody else, staff or public, who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this subject. Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion just to ask the staff if they would create a description of such I'll write up with what I have, my notes that I've written down and send it to you as a place to start from. Oh, okay, Susan, yes?
I had a question. Looking back historically at the history of the net zero, I was looking, and in May, I guess it was May of 2021, when Hingham residents voted yes to develop the climate action plan. Is that correct?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. So as a result of that, at least this is what's posted on the web here. It says, hey, if you go and you read this, it says that that's what, was planned then. That was 3 years ago. So I'm a little confused about what you're looking to do now, which is different than what you said we were going to do in May. It also says here that the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant Board voted to financially support the full cost of developing the CAP and from the sale of renewable energy credits, and that they would donate $80,000 for this purpose, meaning that the residents' rates will not be impacted by the creation of the CAP. So there's a big gap there. Of course, in May of 2021, many of us were worrying about our loved ones that lived across the country. Many of us had deaths, so we really weren't focused on climate action in May of 2021 because of COVID. So if someone there could give me kind of a historical perspective of what did or didn't get done from May till now and why we have to do this again, I'd appreciate it.
So it's a question of doing it in the first place. The May 2021 set up the Climate Action Planning Committee that wrote the plan. The plan was completed about a year ago, and town meeting then created, I think they've dismissed the Climate Action Planning Committee and created a permanent Climate Action Commission whose job is to oversee how the town implements that plan. But in terms of figuring out how the light plant can fulfill its part of the plan is on the town's website to be read. The plan that they made just asked the light plant to please develop a 100% renewable portfolio. Thank you. And it's sort of up to the light plant to figure out how we get there. And so that is the question that we're asking right now.
The light plant or the light board, or a combination thereof?
I would say a combination thereof.
Okay. And the $80,000 that was going to be donated for that purpose? It was donated?
Yes, was used to pay for the consultant who drafted the plan, yeah.
So what's going to be different about this plan is looking for resources into the future to have enough electricity for the town to maintain. Am I understanding?
Yeah, if you look at the climate action plan as written, it's at a very high level saying, well, here's the end goal. Here's where the light plant needs to get to. And so the kind of questions that we've been discussing today are the ones that still need to be answered in order to carry that out, such as, what percentage of our contracts are going to be for renewable energy? Do we need local resources to reach this? How can demand management programs contribute to that? And as Tyler pointed out, well, what is our demand going to be anyway? It's not something that we know yet.
I think that's all worthy of discussion. But my other question that I didn't hear mentioned, but I heard the other night on the call about the infrastructure line, was there was someone on the call that asked a question about what was being done to currently protect. And I don't hear people about protecting the electrical source of Hingham and what is being done. And will that be part of the study so that we have that people can rest assured that our electrical supply is good, but also that the grid itself that comes in and it's proposed to be built there at the town dump, who's protecting that, and what are we doing looking forward to make sure that in fact is secure? I see cameras and it says that, this is being monitored. I think that was a concern to residents that evening, and it certainly is an ongoing concern, that not only about having enough electricity, but how are we going to protect our grid so that the crazy domestic whatever or foreign entities or whatever wouldn't be able to bring us down?
Yeah, so I've
talked about that.
That's a really good question. At the New England Public Power Association conference last summer, we went to I went to an excellent workshop on those issues, and it's not on the agenda today, so maybe we need to schedule a discussion of security on the agenda. I just will point out that one of the points of putting the new power distribution line underground is to make it much less vulnerable to both to acts of God and to, God forbid, some terrorist attack or somebody wants to take it out. So, you know, perhaps we can have a discussion about security of our grid at a future time, but it's not.
I
on the
think that
agenda
would
today.
be, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think that would be in very good order for I think people are concerned about that. And to me, I thought that was part of the selling feature of the whole project. So,
It
but
is, yes.
you're saying that this would not be part of the future planning, would not be the security as well as the source. Is that what you're saying? If you're gonna,
Well,
if you have someone that study it, isn't it important to have both studied at the same time?
Well, I think they're really different questions, but let me chat with Tom about what, you know, what might be involved in looking into our future security. And of course, it's something that you don't actually want to lay your plans out in a public meeting that's recorded on the website. But maybe we can have some conversation at a high level that will help us understand better how we're going to prepare for that in the future.
Well, I think that's good. You know, if the town can rest assured that you're not only looking about where the source is going to come from, but the importance of knowing that it's secure. However, the board or subcommittee thereof secures that, because that's a discussion I have never heard since October of last year, since I've been attending these meetings. So, and every day you hear that in various sources, you know, securities.
It may well be, because it's not a great discussion to have in public, but I'll chat with Tom about what kind of a conversation we could have that would help inform the residents about that. So I entertain a motion to suggest that to ask the staff to produce. Oh, did I already put this motion on the floor, or am I doing it now?
I think you're rephrasing it and putting it on the floor now.
Okay, that we would ask the staff to generate a list of questions that we could possibly do a study to resolve related to how we can reach a carbon-free portfolio by 2040 as mandated in the town's climate action plan. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mike?
Aye.
Tyler?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. Okay, let me check in now about people's availability to continue past 9. Tyler or Mike? Can we do
I'm
this
okay today.
bit? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because we have
Also
a couple
good.
more items on the agenda, which I hope won't take up as much time as this item did. The next item is to discuss the income adjusted rate proposal to include customers on the general heating rate. And we brought it up last week, and we asked last month and asked if we could sort of have a picture of what the economic impact of that would be if we did that. So do we have anything to discuss at this point?
Yeah, I believe I sent only this morning a document out, a couple of
Oh.
documents, and Brianna's gonna
Okay,
help us for us today.
don't think I've seen that. Okay. Here we go. Okay, yep.
Yes.
So you're gonna walk us through it?
Sure. Joan, myself, and Christine looked at this after the last meeting. We have 2 documents that were sent to the board. One is just the same template we had used for the income adjusted rate for all residential customers. It was adapted to have the same numbers as the general heating rate that we're looking at. It's for 123 customers. That document looks at 3 levels of enrollment. There's 10%, which would be about 12 customers, 50%, 62 customers, and 100%, which would be all 123. So if you do look at that, you can see what the impact would be, how much an individual customer would see.
Can you put this up on screen?
Sure. And there's 2 documents that I'll share with you. Let me just make sure this is full screen. So you should be looking at a spreadsheet. I'll zoom in here.
Mhm.
This is an overview of the entire, I guess the rate. It doesn't take into account consumption to an extent that the other document does. So Christine did an in-depth analysis that I'll share with you as a Word document in 1 second. But this just looks at, like, we take the customer charge and the capacity transmission distribution charge and what that looks like at each level. So we know we're doing a 10% rate discount. So that would be these adjusted amounts. You can see that it's reduced from 1350 to 1215, for instance, and so forth. Those numbers feed into what these 4 charts down here. So we see it on a 2024 basis and 2025 with the 6% rate increase. So for 2024, if we look at it per month, this is the estimated revenue impact. If we get 12 customers enrolled, we may be looking at about $120 a month versus 100% enrollment up to about just under $1,200 a month. On an annual basis, that looks closer to $14,000 with a customer saving $10 a month or about $120 a year. So that is just a quick high level of the spreadsheet that we sent. I'm going to stop sharing. Happy to go back to it, but I'm just going to pull up a document that kind of zooms in more simply on 1 month. So Christine was able to look at the bills for all 123 customers, and this is based on their April 2024 statements, which is the March consumption. We found that the customers had an average of 1,400 kilowatt hours per month, which is a lot higher than what we saw with other residential customers. We had previously based it on a $750 kilowatt hour average consumption per month. So it is a lot higher, but it looks like the average bill for the customers before the IA rate was $242. With the IA rate, that goes down to $218. Again, assuming a 10% discount. This rate does take into effect demand in some cases. And so this is about where we're at. Christine's on the call if you'd like more in-depth on the work that she did for this. But they also identified Station Street as a potential high impact place for this. So there are 18 units in that apartment building. So there may be an $80 exposure specifically there alone. So that's generally what we found looking into it.
So we don't really, at this moment, have an idea of how many of these customers would qualify for the income adjusted rate, of course.
We've had one customer reach out at this point. So it could be one, but more likely there are some low-income units in that Station Street.
There are
building.
At least 25%.
It's not going to be all 123 customers. We know that some of the people on this rate are not low income and would not qualify. So it's probably more in the 12 to 62 range of customers.
But when you did on the previous spreadsheet, you were sort of imagining what the annual impact would be of $14,000 based on 100% uptake of this rate?
Yes.
Yeah, so $14,000 would be the top impact and unlikely to go that high.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I wanted to clarify.
More likely looking at like $1,500 or $7,000 between that range.
Yeah, okay. All right. So that's great. That's just the kind of data that I was hoping that we could have before we could make this proposal. I think the motion that has been considered would be to include the general heating rate customers in the eligibility for the income adjusted rate. Do I have that right? Is that what we're discussing? Yes, I think that's what we're discussing. So would someone like to make a motion that we would make yes, please.
Laura, can I just summarize? So we have a closed program where we have a rate that is charged for people or houses, apartments that primarily use resistive heat to heat their homes. And we have 123 people that are signed up for that now closed program. And we are, of those 123 people, we're identifying those that would qualify for a low income rate that are not already included in the one that we have in effect. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, okay, so we go ahead and we include those, excuse me, we include those people in this, but are we doing anything collectively for those 123 people to get them off fully resistive heat and move them over to a better system?
This exact thought occurred to me too when I was preparing for this meeting and thinking about this. And I would suggest that we have a conversation about how we can reach out to these particular customers because they could save so much money on their electric bill if we could help them.
Those numbers are staggering how many kilowatt hours they're using in a relatively warmer month.
Yeah, so if we could help them to run the numbers on making a conversion. Now, of course, One Station Street is an apartment building, so we would be, but I will tell you that we'll get to this when we get to the municipal solar update, but the now Distributed Energy Resources Group is focusing on reaching out to commercial building owners now to help get them connected with the PACE program and with the incentives that are available to make conversions. And we could definitely reach out to that particular building owner, whoever it may be, under that program. But maybe there's a way that we can design a special outreach to people who are on this rate and offer to help them at least run the numbers to figure out what it would cost for them to make a conversion to a much cheaper way of heating and cooling their homes electrically.
Yeah. Start with insulation.
Yeah, of course.
And then move on to heat
As
pumps.
always, yeah.
Yeah, back to the basics.
Yeah, but I'd like to do that. So maybe I'll have a conversation with Brianna about that offline, about what we could do, and Tom.
Good.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to include the customers who are currently on the general heating rate in the group of customers eligible to participate in the income adjusted rate.
So that would be a 10% discount off of those items.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, so moved.
Okay. Tyler?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Tyler?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. Okay, thanks very much. So the next item on the agenda is the board's thoughts on the presentation we had last month about the on-bill financing program that the what is Center for what is the name of CET?
The Center for Ecotechnology.
Center for Ecotechnology has actually given us a proposal for doing a study for what it would look like for Hingham to participate in this. Don't remember if there was a dollar amount connected to that, but I guess we'd like to talk about what people thought about that program and whether we should pursue it or pursue something different.
I think there was one document that they did itemize what they would charge for different levels of, shall we call it, pilot and research, and what they were offering for those dollars.
I'm looking for what people think about whether we should take a next step forward on this particular program or whether we should look for something else in terms of financing for customers who want to make energy retrofits. That's the general topic, is financing for customers who want to make general energy retrofits. How should we go about this? And right now we're discussing, is this a program we want to pursue or not?
I think it's definitely something that we should be pursuing with those vendors that are offering services within the market. I'm not sure where E&E is. I know they were going to come back to us. Maybe Tom, you can allude more on that. I think we do have a proposal on the table that's been presented. It's certainly plausible. It makes sense. So I think it's something we should move carefully forward on.
Brianna, did you want
I-
to speak? Oh, go ahead, Tyler.
I really like the proposal that we saw last meeting. Just to be safe, I'd love to see at least one more for comparison purposes.
Yeah.
But if we can see one more and just get a little bit better idea of the market rate for some of these costs, then feel comfortable going forward with one of them on a pilot and then taking the next step after that.
Brianna, did you want to say something? You're muted.
Sorry, I was just making a note. Yes, so I got a little bit more context in regards to some of the financing conversations that are happening at the state level, and that might influence what we want to do here. I'll also say as a next step, I'm planning to sit down with the MEME CES Energy Services Committee in July. They're going to have presentations with Taunton and Middleborough to deep dive into their financing programs, which is similar to the Mass Save program structure. The DOER is allocating $22 million is the current proposal to MLPs for heat pump rebates and financing programs. So I mentioned that because the financing programs that they're looking for, I think that they have a preference for Mass Save style programs, but they did also mention IUI is a qualifying program structure. They're just working with them to make sure that it can meet all the requirements that they need to get the funding. So it's the 22 million is federal dollars. So they have certain things they have to do, but they know they've styled it around Mass Save. So if we chose to do IUI, it sounds like we can, but it would be we'd have to make sure it's adapted to meet the federal structure that we need.
If we want to apply for those funds to finance it, right?
Yes, and it's an opt-in program, but it is a DOER match. I have notes that I will gather for our next meeting, and I can go into more detail about what they shared. But they're currently writing the specific program guidance, and it'll be released sometime this summer. So we might want to try to align with that. Not get away from, if it's not going to meet our goals, we can certainly go our own way. But I think a lot of MLPs are going to try to align with that to get the funding. I'll also say that in the meantime, the Massachusetts Community Climate Bank has launched. We talked about this a little bit on the last call. Noel from E&E he has guided all of the assessors to give that information to our customers when they're having audit conversations. So our customers are getting information about the climate bank, and they can apply to it for financing currently, which is interesting. It is live now.
How are our customers getting information about the climate bank? Who's informing our customers about it?
When the energy assessors are going to their homes and they have questions about financing, the assessors are pointing them to the climate bank at this stage.
Oh, the E&E energy assessors or the Mass Save energy assessors in both cases?
Yes, the E&E energy assessors. I don't know if the Mass Save assessors are pointing them to it. I would hope that they are, or at least pointing them to the heat loan that Mass Save offers.
Yeah.
But I know that our Energy New England and our assessors are sharing that information.
So the climate bank can you just allude to what specifically that is?
Sure. So it's a $20 million energy saving home loan program. It's for low and moderate income residents.
Right.
To make the clean energy improvements. And so they expect that 20 million is supposed to grow into 200 million. The 20 million is state funds, and they plan on bringing in more private investment once this takes off, and because it is a bank, and then having the capital to keep growing.
Right. I mean, what I'm seeing out there is mostly it is low income opportunities, which covers
Boy, if
some
we-
people in them, but not all.
But if we could focus that financing towards however many of the 123 electric heating customers who apply for the income adjusted rate, they could save so much money.
Absolutely.
If they could just get the resources to make the shift to a modern way of heating their home.
Right.
That would
But
be incredible.
I guess the percentage of the population I'm also interested in is those who don't qualify for those moderate and low income incentives and loan programs, but still have a hurdle of the 30-odd thousand that may be needed for a renovation.
So that's the Mass Climate Bank. Is there a similar limitation on the federal funds that directed towards low and moderate income people?
It does look like to get the most, like low and moderate income would be eligible for the highest percentage of funds from the DOE. And I think we would need to figure out a way. They were unclear in the presentation if we need to qualify that with tax information or if we can have our own system set up like we do with the income adjusted rate. But they did say we need to somehow be qualifying customers and seeing where they are on the income scale to determine if they can get the most funds. It is specific portions, and I have the formula written out in a notebook that I do not have with me. But I think it's like for the heat pumps, for instance, the rebate is $2,000, $4,000, or $8,000, and it's this is the federal funds. If you are low income, you can get the full $8,000. If you're moderate, it's $4,000, and if you're high income, it's $2,000. So it's probably a structure like that where it scales.
So when are you having your meeting where you're going to be learning more about this?
The July meeting will be to touch base on the Taunton and Middleborough programs. But in the meantime, I'll just try to get more information on the DOER's proposal. They're still writing that, so we're just waiting to see.
Okay.
They'll send something out this summer when they issue the RFP, and then yeah, the summer will be big.
Well, how about if we schedule for our August meeting to revisit this and hopefully have more information about the model in Taunton and Middleborough, so that we have a different view on it and learn whatever you know about the federal program then. How does that sound to people? Revisiting then. And hopefully Brianna will have more information. Yep. Any other comments or questions from anyone on this topic?
I will say if I can get somebody to come on to the next meeting, if that's of interest, to see a different program proposal more similar to the Mass Save loan. Tyler, I know you mentioned that. I can try to do that.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love that. I think that was our goal with this in the first time through was, well, let's look at a couple of different models. So, okay. Let's just schedule another conversation, 2 more conversations then. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to approval of meeting minutes. Would anybody like to make some changes to the minutes of the May 14th meeting as drafted?
I think the only one I noticed was we talked about a solar heat pump. I'm not sure the word solar was appropriate in that sentence.
Okay, can you say where that?
Well, just search the minutes, the last
Yeah, I'll
minutes
find it.
for solar, and you'll find it. It was
Okay.
solar and heat pumps. So I mean, I know there are solar assisted heat pumps out there, but I don't think that was appropriate in that sentence. That was the only thing I saw.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Sorry? Okay, I don't know. So then I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of May 14th, 2024 with that change included.
So
Would anybody
moved.
okay, Tyler, second?
Second.
Thank you. Hang on.
Okay, could everybody who is not speaking mute, please? Thank you. So, okay, all in favor, Mike?
Aye.
Tyler?
Aye.
Laura? Aye. And once again, I would like to thank the minutes makers for really, really great. You captured so much about that. The presentation that we had last month was so helpful to me to be able to review it in the minutes before we came back to revisit it this month. Is just extremely helpful. So thank you so much. Excellent, excellent minutes.
Thank you to Joan and Christine and Brianna
Everyone,
for all
yes,
your
thank
efforts
you.
in pulling everything together. A job really well done. Thank you. Much appreciated.
So that brings us to the financials for April.
I will share my screen. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. Again, another strong month in April. Our kilowatt hour sales were up in April compared to 22, but slightly below 23. Our revenue was down based on our, compared to 22, 23 due to our sales, but expenses were in line. Net income, almost $500,000 for the month. We look at the year to date, we're at 1.5 million for earnings year to date for net income. And there's some concerns 4 months into the year that we may approach that 8% cap on our earnings, our net income. So Joan is proposing a decrease in the PCA. I think, Joan, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, yes, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
We were actually, our budgeted power costs for 2024. Year to date, we have been under budget by $875,000. I'm losing my voice, sorry. So our power costs were $875,000 higher in our budget. So I reached out to E&E to ask if they could predict anything that was going to happen for the remainder of the year, and they said no, we're going to stick to the budgeted numbers. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to recoup that $875,000 and give it back to the ratepayers. So what I want to do is I want to spread that reduction over the next 7 months, and to do that, we'll be reducing the power cost adjustment.
Is the idea that something changed about the projections about energy costs
E&E
that
can't
caused that drop?
I reached out to E&E and they can't explain it. They just said that these are budgeted numbers and they've changed. They
Okay.
Well, it's better than being over budget, right? I mean, if it was 875,000 more,
that would be a problem. Yeah.
So it's a good thing that, we're going to be reducing our power cost adjustment. But UFS, they're coming in right on target, other than, the change in our budgeted numbers. So it's looking good as far as from a UFS perspective. So I will be reducing the power cost adjustment for our June bills.
Okay, people will be very happy.
And Tyler could probably speak to this, but I think the gas prices have been down this year, so that's lending to the decrease in our energy costs over the last 4 months.
So just so I understand, what period of time in terms of the energy year have we been overcharging the PCA?
Through April.
From when until when?
From January 1st to April 30th.
Okay, so that's basically a heating season part of the year, and we're going to give that back over what is going to be the cooling part of the season.
That's correct.
So people who heat have paid more, and people who cool are going to pay less. Is that fair to all ratepayers who may heat but not cool?
Well, from a practical standpoint, how else do you want to do it? I'm open to suggestions, but do you go?
Well, maybe we put it in a reserve fund and use it when we need it again in the future.
Well, that means we might go over 8% for the year.
Ah, okay.
think one thing I learned from our financials this morning is that we are socking away as much money as we're
Yeah,
could possibly
we're
be
in a
legally
very
allowed
stubborn
to,
position. Yes.
so that we can, fund that transmission project. And I feel like that's what's keeping us from setting aside other funds, because we need to save for that project.
So do you have a different proposal, Michael? I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
open to suggestions. I
can
don't
we
know how
use it? Can we use it to fund the low income adjustment discount, or
to fund.
I mean, is there somewhere else we can use it in the budget?
No, because we'd still have to recognize it as revenue.
Yeah,
Okay.
So
we can't
that
recognize it as revenue. We need to reduce our revenues, basically.
And
In order to hit our
PCA is the
8%.
only way we can do that, right?
Correct.
Okay,
I guess it's
Okay.
it's a good position to be in.
It could be worse.
okay. Tom, if you could unshare so I can see everybody and just ask if there's anybody else who has a question or comment on our financials.
So how long will this adjustment in the PCA last for, and how much will the next proposed PCA be?
Okay, I'm going to reduce it by a little bit more than 0.5%.
So it'll go down to about 0.5 cent, because it's currently around a cent.
No, it's going to be 0.00375
is where we're going to be at.
is where we're going to be at for our June bills. And I'll look at it again another couple months. It might go back up, it might come back down. I mean,
Depending on the cooling load and
Correct.
the price of gas. Okay. All right.
to determine what our budgeted numbers for the remainder of the year are accurate or not.
Yeah.
Remind me how often you revisit the PCA? Is it like quarterly?
I look at it quarterly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thanks very much. I think we're up to the updates. Tom? Transmission line project.
Yeah, so the transmission line project, we had a joint meeting with the zoning and planning board. The zoning and planning board had a meeting on our transmission. It wasn't our meeting, but unfortunately, when we sent out our update, the PR people missed part of the Zoom meeting link, so there may have been some people who were unable to get on if they were just using that link, so unfortunate. It wasn't our meeting, but we did advertise the wrong link, so there were people on there that and there was some questions asked and answered. I thought it was a productive meeting.
The meeting was recorded and it's available?
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
I'm assuming that those meetings were recorded. Yeah.
So I was at the meeting and it looked to me, I mean, I'm not that familiar with how those two boards do their business, but it looked to me like they went through the process of same process that they would have done if they were going to have permit oversight, which they're not presumably going to have because it's going to be done at the state level. And so I recognized all their conditions, which were all of them boilerplate conditions for how projects have to get done. They made a list of conditions. And then I gathered that what's going to happen next is they're going to send those conditions, their recommended conditions, to the select board, because the select board has made it a condition of their agreeing to lease us, or I guess give us the land to put the substation on. Their conditions will be that we meet the conditions of our local zoning boards, which we've agreed to do. And there was only one change that was not boilerplate, which was that the setback technically, legally should be a setback from Old Hobart Street, which is actually the driveway out of the transfer station. And so the substation is right up on Old Hobart Street, so it doesn't meet the setback. But the board said, we're gonna allow you to draw your setback from Hobart Street itself, which is the real public way. And so then we would meet that requirement. That was the only thing about it that wasn't boilerplate as far as I could tell, and that was helping us to reach our goal. And so in many ways, I wonder if we're going to see those boards again. It looked to me like they did their work. Is that your impression, Tom? They made their recommendations and now that it's going to go to the select board?
Correct. That
Okay.
was the outcome of it.
So there's an informal meeting, but there's not going to be any formal meetings because they don't have formal permit review over this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, as we go to the siting board process, there are going to be other opportunities for us to, to review the project with everyone and get everyone, both Hingham and Weymouth's input into these projects, and everyone's voice will be heard in that process. So.
I would appreciate it if I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for the board here. You tell me if I'm not right, board. Could you impress upon our public relations firm the importance of actually doing their job of informing people publicly of where the actual meeting is being held so people could come, because it's very embarrassing.
Yeah, we're gonna make some changes to make sure that that in fact does take place.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Okay. Now unless there's other questions about the transmission project. HMLP solar. We're still waiting for a piece of equipment from them.
We're still waiting for a piece of equipment in October.
I think maybe we could take that off the update list.
Yeah.
And when we get the piece of equipment, we'll have a party, but you can let us know.
Yeah. Right at the end of the solar season, unfortunately.
So just on the municipal solar, which is really now the distributed energy resource group, we'll be having a meeting tomorrow, but we are working on our outreach towards commercial building owners to connect them with the PACE program and try to help them reach find a way to do their energy retrofits, including solar. We have not reapproached the town on doing some municipal buildings yet, but that will be in the offing. But things are a little slow right now. I think anything else we need to report, Tom?
No. I don't think so.
Okay. Capital
projects. We're working on Circuit 9 right now. That's the biggest projects this year. We also just got our insulators for the transmission project. We have to replace the insulators on the transmission lines coming into town. So we just got the insulators. So that project will be going out to bid shortly, and we're hoping to do that in October. We have a line outage in October, so we're going to try to combine that with that line outage and get that done in October of this year.
Was that a long wait for those insulators?
That was over 2 years, I think.
Right, because I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Demand response program. So we are going to go with Connected Homes. We're just, I guess Connected Homes told E&E that they would only work with MWIC. They were going to have they wouldn't work with E&E on a project or a demand response program that for whatever agreement they had with MWIC, they couldn't do it or something. So E&E continues to look at other options, but given that we don't have any other options ourselves, we're going to go with the Connected Homes. We're just trying to iron out a contract with them at this point.
Well, I just want to say I'm really excited about this.
Yep.
And I'm really looking forward to fleshing it out and promoting it to our customers. It's going to be great. Okay, unless there is any unexpected business that could not have been put on the agenda because it came up in the last 48 hours, unless there's anything like that, then I think we're at the end of our agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mike,
Aye.
Tyler,
Aye.
Laura, aye. Thanks very much, everyone. Great meeting.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.